you hear me well? Let me introduce myself. So I'm Khachatrya. I was introduced in a very right way. I have been teaching here for at least 8 years, but I've been teaching in higher education for 15 years, and not only teaching, but also doing research. So I have my bachelor, master's, and PhD in the US, and PhD comes from Yerevan University, but I also have a PhD in linguistics from Yerevan State University. So the title is Mosaic of Education in Armenia, or reinvigorating about both systems, education and research. So I would like, as you mentioned data, I was really trying to present a lot of data, and I thought it would be too boring just to specifically focus on data, so I just put up several key points here. I'll try to make a presentation within 30 minutes, and we'll open the floor for discussion and questions. So basically about 21st century, what it really is to us. First of all, we have really witnessed like an audience connected with the democratization. So this one has really triggered substantive changes at local levels, at national levels, in all systems, both for higher education and research. Then we also penetrated into the age of knowledge-based economies, and everything just well encompassing in the process in the work like as globalization. So globalization basically had its impact on higher education systems in several different ways. One of them that was about long development of any society and keeping the national values and traditions in academia. And the second one was very instrumental to economic growth and social cohesion. So basically what is, if you can just slide up, globalization as a driving force. So what happened here? So we see a lot of changes in the educational paradigm. So educational constructs have been really keep changing, and the processes are going forward and developing globally, nationally, as well as locally. So the next one I call like at the local level, whenever we see global processes that are happening and we are just trying to localize. But there are times when this localization really doesn't involve a lot of content-driven approaches. So basically, I specifically focused, if you can slide this on. So targeted reforms, what happened as one of the major impacts of globalization. Globally, there are more educational providers. So I just took information from World Higher Education Database. Currently, we have 60,000 higher education institutions throughout the world. And I don't know whether this is good or not. Starting from 1991 up to now, we have approximately 250 universities in Armenia. So globalization, whenever it started happening, it brought like a huge tide of education providers basically in Armenia. Now, of course, a lot of them got either merged or they just disappeared from the arena, but still we have around 45 or 50 universities. In comparison with our population, it's not like a very OECD recommended ratio. So the next one. So I put here about globalization, like it's global rankings, one of the results. So I will just present here what is, by the way, global rankings in terms of data that we have. So basically there are 45 global rankings throughout the world, which are basically American oriented. So there are global university rankings, regional university rankings. There are also like sub-rankings and specific domain-oriented rankings. So who are beneficiaries? Basically, it says students, our industries, universities. Whenever we come to the topic of discussing what should be the content, all those providers and how all these beneficiaries participate in decision making. Here's the problem that we start like facing that we don't know what should be the solution to this one. So could you please start up? So most popular rankings globally, these are 4, Times Higher Education, QS, Shanghai, and US News. So I basically put here what are they specifically focused on. All of them are specifically focusing on research. For example, Shanghai is predominantly research-oriented. And it basically, whenever it comes to the topic of discussing, let's say, how can universities try to be in the rankings, to be more visible at the international level. Here the problem rises. It goes to the problem of resources, which are oriented towards research. It comes to the topic of how many Nobel Prize winners do we have, whether we are doing research outputs globally and nationally visible or not. So the next one, I'm just trying to give you like the overall understanding of my presentation, but I'll be very happy to specifically focus on any topic that you would like. So these are observations. So there are 158 universities which come across all of those 4 global rankings. So I just put like 87% they match. And definitely, majority of them, around 90% of those universities are in the Western educational sphere rather than this popular region. So this is also one of the challenges that we need to face as Armenia for developing our education system further. So 43, no, if you can go back, yes, no, this one. So I'll just also cover the main limitations. The main limitations to be in the global rankings is English-oriented content. It means both research and education content are English-oriented, and we are research-oriented universities. It basically means we need to understand what should be the new puzzle for Armenia. Whether we are pursuing research and what type of research, in which specific priorities we are pursuing our research interests. Yes, please start. So these are, as I mentioned, these global rankings and globalization really result in different challenges. One of those challenges is conflicting interests between global, regional, and national education environments. Whenever we say, for example, education area, we, as Armenia, we officially adopted a strategy that we are going towards EAGA, European Higher Education Research Area, in 2005. It means we chose a strategic priority of Europe. However, but at the same time trying to navigate ourselves towards other education areas like American education areas, CIS education area, which is basically Russian-oriented education area. And whenever we come to the content of programs or research, here we are having like conflicting ideas in terms of values. The second idea that I see as a challenge here is like all human capital dramatic demographic changes. In Armenia, this is specific, like huge issue. One of them is number of potential researchers, age structure in the body of our educators, researchers. We have Academy of Sciences, and like the minimum, actually no, the average age of academician is around like from 54 up to 62 ages. So for research, it is really like indication of that research in those specific schools is getting old rather than is getting new and is getting new innovative approaches. And also brain drain, we have a huge issue of brain drain, especially during these last 10 years. The next problem is ensuring problem of insufficient state investment in research and development as in comparison with OECD averages. The next one, increasing global competition that leads to considerable shift in state priorities. If our state universities were competing at one time with private universities in Armenia, now state universities are competing with both private universities, with other providers of different types of education, so let's say American University in Armenia, about Russian Slavonic University, our education providers externally. Could you please just, yes. Here, those challenges also have several very measurable impacts both on systemic level and institutional levels. One of several systemic challenges here are the existing top-down centralized management, meaning our still the model of education in Armenia is still centralized wherever the ministry is the key point in bringing different types of to establishing different types of practices or other legal documents. The next one, not data-driven decision making. There are times when we do not have centralized management information systems, having a lot of data from different universities, and we make our policies and decisions not heavily based on data coming from universities or coming from our education sphere. The next one, non-effective education management practices, as should be in comparison with European values and European practices. I'll talk about this one later on in terms of our structure of university management and our goals. The next one, drastic changes in technologies that leave Armenian AGIs really far from new disruptive education technologies. I mean, basically we are not even starting thinking in terms of disruptive technologies, both in teaching, in learning, in research, even in education management. One of our challenges is low percentage of stakeholder engagement in the Armenian higher education system. As I mentioned, global rankings are also directed towards different beneficiaries, and one of those beneficiaries is like local industry representatives. We really do not, and we do not heavily base our decisions on like all the human capital that we have in the industry. So the next one, please. So here we have ideological distancing. I'll later on call this one like placebo effect. Placebo is like a pill which has like the overall visual that this is a pill, but inside it's still empty and it's still we are filling it up. So what happened between 91, whenever we just disintegrated with the Soviet Union, up to 2005. So we basically distanced ourselves, like as a Armenian higher education system, from global or regional processes that were going on. The only regional cooperation was between CIS countries, meaning post-Soviet countries. So only in 2005 we just started thinking what is going on globally and what is going on in Europe. And around like 2001 and 2 we just decided that we need to go that way and we need to take opportunities that are there from our Armenian educational and research systems. So, as I mentioned, Armenia ideologically distanced itself from all those developments. But hopefully we started like catching up and we joined Bologna process in 2005. So the next one, please. Here happened what is called placebo effect. Whenever we in 2005 joined, we were forced to introduce like different European systems like credit accumulation, credit transfer systems, like free higher education system, but we changed only at the system level, meaning we really didn't go into the content of all those education programs and we didn't really delve into a research-oriented component of it. So we just did symbolic gestures, meaning we verified all the documents, we adopted all legal documents for Armenia, we changed different state policies, but still, even now, we do have two different concepts. We have national qualifications framework with all the learning outcomes mentioned, and we have whatever was called state standards coming from the Soviet period of time. So there are still conflicting ideas which are impeding the whole process of our globalization. So the next slide, please. So now, as I mentioned, starting from 2005, we try to reinvigorate the system. Especially during the last decade, we put a lot of effort and we brought together a lot of human capital to solve several issues. One of them is European agenda should be consistently a common reference point. At this stage, I can definitely say that even our accreditation processes at universities are going towards the European standards and are going towards European way of thinking. So we are trying to have a common reference point, like EHGs, like European standards and guidelines. The next one, policy integrating to the outside world. So we started, as I mentioned, we nationally have cooperation with different education areas. We try to make networking much better. And in this context of networking, our reforms are really proceeding in a very proper and measurable way. So the next one, we attach also great importance to the harmonization of educational and research systems. Though it might sound a little bit weird that how come research is still segregated and separated from education, but yes, in Armenia we did have two different concepts, educational system and research area. research system. And now, at this stage, during these 4 or 5 years of the recent ones, we started bringing education research interlinking with each other. So whatever was done at the research level was integrated into the educational content. The next one, please. The next slide. So here we came to current trends of democratization and globalization, what I call education democratization in Armenia. This is the first one, and economic competition from the other side. Several examples here of education democratization. We started having accountable and transparent education management systems, including even our board of directors or boards of trustees in different universities. So this is one of the democracy-oriented processes that is going on. The next one, we started enhancing the quality of higher education ESG practices. So we basically went through the first kind of crediting all universities and bringing towards the more European agenda or more European processes. So the next one that we tried to have, we used to have a multi-level education systems where we were being conferring degrees at different levels. Right now we have ANQF, Armenian National Qualification Framework, which states that we have 8 levels. But in practice, while practicing, starting from 8th level, 2 different concepts. One of them is candidate of sciences, like the first level of, let's say, recognition as a researcher, and the next one is doctorate of sciences. However, starting recently, this change is going towards having like 1 PhD, meaning if that person got like a PhD, the next step for all those who had like the doctors can be like distinguished professors, emeritus professor, and such kind of recognitions outside of the degree level. The next one is about introducing the concept of lifelong learnings throughout all levels of the development of that person. So next. Economic competition, so we started thinking what's going on in industries and how we can be more competitive in the market level. That's why we started, I'm not telling that we're there, but we started just introducing entrepreneurial different practices. And for this reason, all universities like around 2014 changed their legal status from one entity, from like state-based university to the legal status of foundation. But at this stage, I mean, we have around like 8 years have passed, universities really haven't capitalized on best European or American practices of entrepreneurial activities. So the next one is advanced technological solutions for education research. We started cooperating with different industry representatives, and this is specifically very measurable in the field of IT, of information and technologies. We're trying to bring industry representatives into the delivery of the content at universities. I'm not telling that we are there in terms of bringing all industry representatives, but at least there are tools, strategic priorities that we are working towards those areas. And the next one is close integration of science and research-based practices with enterprises and universities. It means industry representatives are also participating in the research content and research agenda of universities. Next slide. And economic competition, as I mentioned, we have 11 state universities change their legal statuses. This is very unfortunate to state here that our private universities are really not very competitive. In the West, private universities, there are times that are more competitive than public or state universities. In Armenia, vice versa processes happen. They are trying to replicate whatever is going in the state universities, and they are not really capitalizing on the best practices. And here, one of the most important and notable things that I would like to bring your attention to is no major input-oriented accomplishments have been recorded so far. What I'm trying to say is that we do not have strategy. Our strategy for higher education just stopped in 2015. It ended, and from 2015 up to now, we haven't really started working towards having a new strategic concept of where Armenian and higher education system should go, and what will be the long-term, mid-term, and short-term impact. So the next one, the next slide, please. So key changes, as I mentioned, we did huge job in bringing increased autonomy to universities and different education institutions. Independent QA systems, so we're really trying to move towards that way. It definitely is, we're not there because it takes some time. So for really increasing that culture of being autonomous plus doing transparent and accountable constructs, it takes some time. We started the whole process in 2011, so it's like 11 years have passed, and I guess we're on the right direction. The next one, as I mentioned, we have national qualification framework, which has been changed twice, and hopefully the second time it will be more local in terms of its content and impact. The next one, credit transfer and accumulation systems that we are doing according to EAGA, like EAGA, all the processes, and we have ECTS system here, though we do not have label. One of those problems that in Armenia we don't have the ECTS label, but we are striving towards getting that label. And free-tier higher education system, meaning we have bachelor, master, and PhD level. So these are the key changes that were the result of those global thinking and global processes that happened at the local level. So for further refinement of our systems, we need to really start thinking about national strategies. We need to really bring a lot of resources outside of Armenia, because as I mentioned, we're a brain drain. A lot of Armenians just leave Armenia for good, but they are very willing to come back and really impact our systems here. Next one, appropriate arrangements to encourage knowledge competitive practices. By meaning appropriate arrangements, I think that we need to really cooperate with industry representatives, university and state. It should be like framework of those practices. The next one, integrate distinctive aspects of different subject areas. Well, at this stage, we are specifically focusing on STEM, but other humanities, social sciences are really lagging behind. And this, even in the midterm, it really results in a mismatch between market needs. So the next one here, these are like key challenges and obstacles. I don't know, there's a one type of mistake I'm very sorry for this one, I don't know how it happened. So there are 6 clusters here. Education system regulators, AGIs, faculty content, and industry and professional associations. For education system, those challenges, as I mentioned, there's no strategy on education and research development. There's no clarity in defining the role and expectations from the AGIs. State is pushing universities all the time to do more. The state is not willing to bring more resources to those practices. I mean, state is saying, universities, you should need to do this one, but with diminishing resources. And universities, in several places, they cannot really engage in different activities, at least because there is no culture, and there is no really human capital there yet to start doing competitive thinking. No defined methods for fiduciary responsibilities of board members, like boards. Fiduciary responsibilities meaning based on the trust. For example, the same representative from, let's say, ministry can serve in 5 different boards, or at least 3 different boards. It means there are conflict of interest and there are conflicting strategies that they need to bring to those boards. The next one, disruptive technologies, as I mentioned, not a priority at this stage on the government agenda. Whatever is happening, it's happening on university institutional levels. Next one, regulations prevent industry meaningful engagement in research and educational agenda. For example, we can't have more different alternative funding methods, let's say endowment funds. This is not yet coordinated and this is not yet regulated. However, there are some set of restrictions there that impede the whole process. The next one, lack of systemic approach to education changes across all levels. I mean here that our school system is going one way, our universities, like vocational, like colleges, are going in 2 different ways. So it means basically 3 different levels are doing different reforms and they are not really aligned with each other. both vertically and horizontally. The next one, like alternative funding systems, as I mentioned, and also system-wide data to guide decision making. I think one of the huge issues that I put a lot of data here, but then I thought that I really don't want this presentation to be only quant. I want it to be more of qualitative, so the discussion will be more fruitful and more engaging. So the next one, for higher education institutions. So insufficient investment in review existing new programs. So basically, we are really not putting a lot of effort in revising our education programs. Then we are not really equipped to face the challenge and disruptions of a global traffic. It means our universities are not yet there in terms of our resources to understand what's going on globally and what are, let's say, blockchain technologies and how can we reflect those changes. Next one, limited stakeholder engagement, as I mentioned, and also no systemic approach of leadership and management. So it basically means whenever we come to the discussion of gender, we have also mismatch between the understanding between public regulators and university rectors and university academic people. Faculty and researchers, as I mentioned, there are very limited resources for upskilling or reskilling our faculty members. I mean, to me, faculty should be like the key drivers of change, being like the multipliers of effect in Armenia. Next, our promotion evaluation are not predominantly based on research outputs, and those outputs are not internationally yet visible. The next one, compensation policy and inadequate incentives. Faculty members are really not heavily incentivized to do more research and to bring those research outputs into their education practices. Next one, limited opportunity for industry exposure. It means faculty members, there are times when they are not really heavily engaged in the industry development. The next one, regulations preventing industry engagement, meaning there are no specific state regulations for that one. For the content, meaning for educational programs, so I cover some of them. So we have time-based curriculum, one model fits all. And this model was like very observable whenever we had COVID-19, and we really didn't know how to react to those changes. I mean, switching from face-to-face to online, well, that was a global challenge. In Armenia, that was really very profound. It took us at least from 2 to 3 months to start understanding what should be happening at the institutional level. Those 3 months were not anyhow later on caught up with content. So it basically 3 months or 4 months have just passed, and after that one we had war situation in Armenia, still another challenge for us. So it means basically, for example, 1 year was really not caught up later on in terms of the content. And theory-dominated spheres we have rather than like empiric evidence-based thinking. So in major ways and in majority cases we are basing our educational content based on theory. Next one, also limited opportunity for first-hand exposure, meaning involvement of the industry here. So the next one, for industry and professional associations, as I mentioned, we do not have assessment of system-wide needs. It means we do not have professional associations, we do not have professional industry representatives doing accreditations at universities or in delivering the program. I'm not telling that this is happening at all levels, meaning at institutional levels, but there are very limited local practices. Next one. Context of 4.0 industrial revolution, we should really, at this stage, state that Armenia is not really ready for this industrial revolution. I mean, the educational technologies are something that are developing like daily, hourly, and we are not really catching up with those practices. In the long term, that will definitely impact our graduates and our competitiveness of graduates. So here we need to frame the discourse of education based on nationally established practices and globally or regionally best practices. Next one is really that I would like to specifically focus on value-driven, clearly defined about values dispositions. because if we do not at this stage decide what should be value-driven Armenian content, we wouldn't know how to integrate European or other value systems into our national context. Next one. So here I'm just also proposing two processes going on at different levels, from top-down to bottom-up process. Because in Armenia right now, we used to have a lot very heavily dominated top-down process. Whenever the minister said something, university directors were replicating those reforms and everyone else is going to implement this one. This is still there. However, during at least this 15 or 20 years, bottom-up processes really have started taking their way into decision-making processes. It means at the local level, faculty members, different groups, definitely are able to bring forward their agenda. So could you please just slide up, thanks. So universities, as I mentioned here, have key roles in those processes. I'm not trying to go through all points one by one, I'm just trying to catch up the main idea that I'm trying to relate to you. So here, universities need to propose further methods and tools into a practice. So how do they need to do? One of those methods is professional networking. So right now, I mean, we are all here, it means we are really doing good professional networking. Another way of, very good example of professional networking is our accreditation that happens within the European all accreditation agencies, and we are bringing at least one European colleague, expert in all our accreditation processes of universities, of programs as well. Next one, by building constituencies for mutual understanding between local networks as well, between industry representatives. And the next one is by redesigning educational mechanisms and practices. It means we need to start thinking how our mechanisms can be changed, what should be changed, and which areas those major changes should be concentrated on. So you can slide up this one because I covered this one. Go ahead. One more. Here, no, do not go back. Go forward. One more, yes. Way forward. So I think here we need to specifically focus and discuss how human capital, like our intellectual storage, can be revitalized. For example, one of those research and ideas that I have, and I've been the head of a huge group that are proposing new model of education system in Armenia. Actually, we are starting with a new model of higher education institution, meaning it can be online, fully online, which will be innovative for Armenian context. I wouldn't go into the details of this one yet, but that will give us opportunity to evangelize all our researchers and educators throughout all the world. At this stage, we have around 3 million people living in Armenia and 10 million living outside of Armenia. Huge diaspora potential. So we are also basing our own models and constructs based on the empirical data that we have with all the networking, and we are trying to propose a new model. Next one. Yes, here we are trying to gain that capacity for visualizing broader spectrum perspectives. We are also trying to move forward the strategy, the discussion of new strategy of education, and how industry representatives of our experts can bring their inputs into it. One of other things that we need to do is strategically comprehend a strategic approach in terms of the development of education areas. Should Europe be the only European strategy for us, or as we are cooperating with different education areas, we need to have a more complementary policy there? And how to construct the mosaic? Why did I call this overall presentation mosaic? We have puzzles, but we have missing parts of this puzzle. It means there are times when we have good practices here, but we do not have those resources there. In our places, we have human resources, but we have no financial resources. And that's why I just called this one mosaic. Mosaic takes some time to go step by step, connecting all of those together. So, as I mentioned, we need to start thinking about long-term vision for Armenia. The next one, clearly defines state priorities. What should happen at the state level and what should happen at the institutional level. There's a full government commitment and wider scope of stakeholder engagement. Why do I say full government commitment? Government has committed to open up, for example, the decision making for universities, right? But still, 50% of representatives are from the government. It means government is saying, you know, you can do accountable and transparent mechanisms, but I'm going to have 50 or more percent of my representatives on your boards and your decision making. So it really impedes the whole idea of autonomy, like academic autonomy, financial and research autonomy. The next one, implement full-fledged integration into global higher education arena, meaning our full-fledged integration, meaning still are going towards European higher education area, but we are not integrated into European research area. It means we have really done a lot of work in AGI, but we are really lagging behind from integration into Europe. This much, so I tried to keep my 35 minutes exactly as I promised, so I'm opening up the floor, so maybe you can take your questions and I can entertain them, or we can open up for discussion. These are So these are my two emails, personal emails. I didn't put my Yerevan University email because there are times whenever, I don't know why, global emails coming from different providers are not reaching me. So I just decided to be on safe side. I just put both Yahoo and Gmail so that definitely I can get an email later on. So,
first of all, thank you for this comprehensive review of the Armenian higher education system challenges and characteristics. Some of the challenges are unique, as you explained us. Some we are share all around Europe, so we have a deep understanding, I think, about the challenges you raised here. I don't know, can we talk like this? It is not a huge space. No, you cannot hear. So maybe we can use the microphone.
You can use this microphone if you would like to. If I can take our microphone from you.
Okay, this is with the table.
So would you mind coming towards the front if you have questions?
We should do this. I can raise my voice a little bit. But please, if you have questions for our, you are the fastest one. Can you please come and pose the question or explain?
Can you hear me?
Sure.
Dear Robert, thanks so much for your very clear presentation. Really amazing and really good to know so much more about the Armenians and the system of higher education. But you have so many challenges ahead, as I've just learned from your presentation. Have you considered setting a few priorities, like which issues you want to address first? Because I would be really curious to know more about that. Particularly one aspect intrigued me is the autonomy of the universities, of the higher education institutions. And I was thinking, what kind of autonomy? Is it like financial autonomy or decision-making capacity, or like more in terms of content? So yeah, so thanks again.
Thank you. So basically, you can hear me well, right? I mean, fine. So your question has two. So your question has two components, as I mentioned. We have a lot of challenges, how to address those challenges. And the first one, how do we address the question of autonomy? So the first one, that, as I mentioned, we do not have strategy. Armenian government doesn't have yet a strategy to decide which are strategic priorities. All those developments are happening at the decentralized level, at the university levels or at the local levels, meaning at the chairs, departments level, and we are just producing different good practices. So at this stage, we have tried, like when it was 4 years ago, to start the discussion of one strategy, but then a lot of political processes happened and we just stopped this one. Hopefully in coming year, because there is one new draft strategy, on the government agenda. So hopefully by the end of the next year, we will have one strategy which specifically will focus on strategic priorities, because that will definitely be very helpful for universities as well, plus for state funding. Because right now we're just funding without knowing which priorities we're funding. In terms of autonomy, there are different types of autonomy that have been granted to universities. Let's say financial autonomy. Boards themselves, they decide the budget. They decide the budget and they really decide what should be in those budget lines. However, whenever it comes to a state approval and whenever it comes to state engagement, here we have 50% of the board members which are state representatives. It means they are pushing their agenda rather than giving the floor to the board themselves to decide what should be the priority for the specific year. In terms of academic autonomy, our content. Content is really here, we have a huge accountability and transparency mechanism. Departments, they are deciding the content in terms of curriculum, in terms of both teaching, learning, assessment with methodologies and the content. So we have autonomy in the academic one. However, whenever it comes even to other types of autonomy, let's say human capital autonomy of deciding who should be, let's rector of this university or that university, still this is a political autonomy. Whenever it comes to the political autonomy, the government is taking its stance in saying who should be the leader. For example, like several years ago, simultaneously, 3 state universities, one of the major universities, including Yerevan State University, didn't have rector, like full rector, for 3 years. We had acting rector, and that was really huge. It really brought huge impact to the education management practice. The same happened with the second largest university, Yerevan State University. That university didn't have rector for 3 years. It means there were several years, approximately 3 years, where a lot of, at least 5 state universities didn't have rectors. So that was really impacted for whole processes that were happening at the local level. So I guess I addressed both parts of your question.
Thank you.
Thank you again for your presentation. You have talked about challenges, but you have also mentioned good practices and the need for data to make decisions. And I want to ask you to elaborate this with one specific example, and I'm interested in your challenge. One challenge you mentioned, you say it's a challenge to restore national values. And we all in our countries know and see that value education and citizenship education in higher education institutes is a growing question. Therefore, I'm interested in learning from you what are good practices of restoring national values in Armenian universities, and what kind of data are you planning to gather about these practices in order to enable political decisions? So are you talking about informal, formal education, and non-formal education activities on restoring national values? And are you planning to gather input indicators, process indicators, or outcome indicators on restoring national values? And how do you operationalize these data gathering in reforming your education system? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. This is a really very good question. As I mentioned, universities have data, but they do not heavily make their decisions based on data. The same happens at the state centralized level. Whenever we make the policy changes, we do not heavily base our decisions on data coming from the university. This is all but heavily based on different, not engage in or connect with it. Whenever it comes to good practices, so definitely I can say that all universities have measurable outcomes, because we do have, all universities have strategies, they all have KPIs, and we do all measure our annual progress. Whenever I mentioned the value, I talked about both, I meant more about the not the quantity, but the quality. Because we do know how to measure different things. My main concern is what are those different things. For example, whenever we say EAGA integration, we are bringing several generating values, but we are not really trying to understand whether those values are applicable to our society or are applicable to our different educators or board members. One of them is saying that stakeholder engagement, right? We are thinking of having boards with different members coming from industry representatives. But as I mentioned, the same board member can serve in different boards without paying attention to the value of conflict of interest, value of transparency, value of fiduciary responsibility. Whenever I say value-driven content, it means as country, whenever we start thinking about strategy, we need to understand which are those values, which are written in our constitution, but which are not yet transferred into educational management policy practices. Because in Armenian constitution, we as Armenian people voted as a referendum and said these are our values. These values are specifically focused in the document. These are not yet translated into all different practices and institutions. And this, I think, comes from also the lack of strategy, because we don't know, those strategic values which are they, and how we are going to develop in coming 10 or 15 years. What will be the vision of, let's say, Armenian graduate, whether that person will be a global citizen or that person will be a citizen of Armenia. While raising this issue, especially this is very profound in different fields such as IT, because our universities are not producing really competitive IT members. Our industry representatives, they are upskilling and reskilling those graduates within 1 year. We are preparing them for global markets rather than the national market. That was something that I meant by saying value-driven education system. Because whenever it comes to measurement, as I mentioned, we definitely do know how to measure and using different tools. KPI, performance indicators are one of them, OKR are another one. So we really do it at a systematic level. But we don't know what we are measuring in terms of the levels. Did I answer your question or very specific?
I do not want to take too much time. I thought there was at least one other question. Therefore, I have.
And we can also engage later on after this one and have a discussion.
Thank you. I have just perhaps another element of the higher education policy discussions or discourse. The numbers of students are rising worldwide. I would like to know how in your country is this a topic, an issue? Parents want that their children go to university, and we have in a lot of countries, for example, discussions about the vocational education system, push vocational education to further the numbers of technical students and not to study things like pedagogy or languages, but much more tougher things like technical issues. Do you have such discussions in your country? And is there any policy to raise the numbers of students, or the contrary, to try to reduce the numbers?
Thank you for your question. In terms of state policy, there is none which is adopted and communicated to all universities. However, there are different processes which are going on, but this is really very interesting. I don't know why. At least this year, this academic year, we didn't have too many applicants to universities. At least during these 2 years, we have started noticing that there are less students interested in going and getting formal education rather than getting non-formal education, especially in different fields. One of them is IT project management. A lot of graduates think, why should I go to bachelor level for 4 years because in Armenia this is specifically limited to 4 years plus 2 years of master's degree. Why should I do this one? I can go to a sphere of IT project management because we have huge inflow of organizations, companies coming from Mosaic. So, but you raised another very big issue. We have lack of awareness in who should go to college, who should go to university, what college education will give them, and what higher education system will give them. So this is something that is connected with awareness campaigns that we do not do too many things at our schools. But as I mentioned, we have several processes going on at different levels. At this stage, I think we need to bring everything together, what's going on at the school level, what's going on at the college level, what's going on at the university level, and to strategically align all those processes. In this case, definitely we want to have a lot of universities going to universities rather than to colleges. I think this is something that we need to incorporate into our strategy. But no, we do not have those policies.
One time that is rating. Please.
Thank you, Robert. A quick question. You said that promotions don't happen according to the evaluation of research for staff, I guess. So I was curious to know, how do you get a promotion around here?
What promotion about?
Promotion of staff, I guess, becoming full professor, for instance, if it is not about outcomes in research, what's about?
Thank you so much. This is a very good question. So basically what happens, faculty members are getting their tenure, or at least for their professional commitment, for 5 years. Based on different, it means their evaluation happens each 5 years. It doesn't happen annually in all universities. So right now, Yerevan State University and our 2 or 3 state universities, they are trying to bring more incentives for the research output. Meaning, if you have, let's say, in high impact factor journal, they are giving you more financial incentives. However, this is not a practice of annual performance appraisal, which really what happens. Basically, university professors are either doing research at the national level, meaning the national research outputs are not visible because this is in Armenia, and our journals are at this stage doing a huge job of getting into Web of Sciences scopus, databases, but this is not a particular staff appraisal mechanism in Armenia. Research is not considered as one component. Other things such as student evaluations play their role. Your other methodological publications play a role. But my point here that, for example, whenever it comes to associate professors or professors, you should be heavily engaged on their research outputs, not at the national level, but at the globally visible level. This is basically my approach.
Yeah, thank you so much for your talk and insights about the Armenian situation. I was wondering, because I've been for 2.5 weeks now in Armenia and was really surprised by the way Armenians are related to each other, where instead of in Europe, I also feel that we relate to time and money and prepare students for the growing economy, which is more and more in conflict with the global situation of sustainability and crisis where we're in. So we need a situation where we more start to relate to each other, and I'm really curious if you recognize this culture within higher education in Armenia and how you can, if you do something with it, and how we can learn from you in this, because I think it should be both sides.
Thank you so much. I think this is about values. We are very related, interconnected as nation, and I'm very, very happy to be here. For example, right now, I don't know how this happened, but I got headhunted Right now I'm located in Abu Dhabi, so in the United Arab Emirates, so I'm the higher education policy section manager for Arab Emirates. But still, as I committed to this conference and I committed still to the development of higher education system, I came all the way from there here to here to represent our university. And I'm more than sure that whenever we go somewhere as a professional network, we are very related to each other, and this is something which is, as I call, national value. I think that our interconnectedness is one of our Armenian values. And for, as you mentioned, learning from each other, I think that these professional networkings and these type of events are really very helpful to know each other, to get connected, and to start cooperating at different levels. Not at state level, because this is something which happens very slowly. But at university level, as I mentioned, from bottom to up, it's really working. And this is one of the best mechanisms that have been working in Armenia during at least the last 15 or 16 years. But we are interrelated.
Thank you. We are at the end of our time, and it's just time for one more question.
It's possible.
Thank you, Robert, for a very good presentation, for a very transparent presentation, and very rich with the content. So, very good research. So my question is, I think, is a very small aspect about the cost of education. When we talk locally in our academic managers and raising the question regarding quality, we're facing the answer that the cost of education is too low to have a good quality. For example, in our university, a 1 year cost for a medical student, it is $2,500 per year. I don't know how it's in the other countries, but it's quite cheap. And my question is, do you think it is possible to have a good quality based on this price, or we should increase the price, or we should do it simultaneously, at the same time? What do you think about this? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I guess in terms of OECD average, we are not very low. We are towards around 30 or 40% of OECD average. So basically, I think that you are right, that we can't get very good quality with low cost of education. However, this is about who pays for that education. In several European countries, state pays for the education, or different industry representatives pay for the education. We need to differentiate what are our strategic priorities, and for those all areas that are strategic priorities, state should pay fully for that education, the specific areas. However, in those areas which are not state like strategic priority, and individuals themselves should pay for those different types of constructed formal, non-formal, and informal education. Here also comes what should be the engagement, the involvement of industry representatives. We don't have our field recognition learning, bringing, let's say, non-formal education into the formal education system, and this is also due to cost of education. We can't really increase the cost of education without considering what is the average cost of living in Armenia. And right now, our cost of education definitely goes in parallel with our cost of living in Armenia. And here also, different industries, different professional associations should come whenever they want industries, especially. We have synopsis and different IT companies. They understood that they need those human capital. They get those students from, let's say, second years of their studies. They train them, and they really prepare very competitive human capital, which are definitely either being utilized in Armenia or they are exporting. Synopsis has really done a good job of exporting human capital from Armenia to Silicon Valley. But this is something that we are open, and we are trying to engage different such kind of processes. However, whenever it comes to strategic priorities, we need to decide which are those areas that we need to train, to educate people, and to retain them in Armenia with providing good service. But I think that cost of education definitely is like a multi-level component we should be faced with compared with the cost of living.
Any other question you have to pose? If not, I think it is time to all of us take a break, a coffee break. Once again, thank you for your presentation. And special thank you from the organizers and ERA office.
And thanks all of you for being here.